When the player first sets out from their starting city-state, they're given 3 dungeons to run as a sampler for how group content will work in the future. These dungeons are Sestasha, Copperbell Mines, and this one, Tam-Tara Deepcroft. This is the second dungeon that gets unlocked, and it certainly seems to fit with the intended progression curve. It takes the concepts presented in Sestasha and elevates them in ways I can't really get into until we cover the other 2 dungeons, but for now, let me just say that this dungeon does a good job as an introduction to group content for new players. The issue is, a new player is only new for so long. Eventually, everyone gets the hang of this game and becomes an experienced player. At that point, these early game dungeons stop being nice, slow-paced, low-intensity intros to group content, and instead become annoying slogs through dull, unengaging trash mobs and mechanical dead zone bosses. Let it be known that any praise I give this dungeon should be taken with the caveat that these dungeons are annoying slogs through dull, unengaging trash mobs and mechanical dead zone bosses. Here, let's try it out. Out of the 3 beginner dungeons, this is easily the best annoying slog through dull and engaging trash mobs and mechanical dead zone bosses. See? Just fill that in every time I praise this thing. That out of the way, let's get to the meat of this dungeon. When structuring these videos, I normally break the dungeon down into its trash areas and its boss fights, but there's really not much reason to do that here, so I'm just gonna sum up all the trash areas and all the bosses, but the last one in one go. Alright? Alright. Tam-Tara goes through almost no mechanical changes as the party progresses through it. The basic concept sees the party descending into a deep pit, interrupting the activities of cultists as they work their way down. The trash is made up of the monsters that inhabit the dungeon and cultists who are naturally pissed that an adventuring group has arrived to break all their stuff. There's nothing to the trash until the very end of the dungeon where you have to walk past a big spooky glowing magical barrier to go punch some more cultists and get their magical artifacts so you can lower said barrier. Keep in mind that there are casters among the cultist ranks, so tanks need to make sure they're with the rest of the pack when you're burning trash. So there are allegedly 4 boss fights in Tam-Tara, but that is a lie. A big stinky lie. There are 2 bosses here, and one of them isn't even really a boss, just a bunch of ads with a single AoE. Naturally, this is the one that the devs decided to make you fight 3 times in a row. But don't worry, the boss has some trash that dies instantly before he spawns, and the way that they decided to increase the difficulty of the dungeon was to give him 1 more piece of instantly dead trash every fight. Once the funny cultist and his imp buddies die, the real boss spawns, which is a big spooky demon that has a cone AoE, and that's it. Well, that's not true. It also gives itself a thunder enchant, which makes its damage go from nothing to nothing times 2! Kill this as fast as possible and move on before you fall asleep. Now, up until this point, I've made this dungeon out to be pretty bad, and honestly it is. However, the one ray of hope that prevents this dungeon from sinking any lower into this tier is its final boss. After working your way down into the heart of the cultist operations in the pit, the giant spooky sphere of darkness that has been looming over the party finally descends, revealing... oh shit. Can I say the name of this thing? Yeah, I know its in-game name, but can I say the obvious monster name without getting shot by a Wizards of the Coast intellectual property retention sniper trademark? No? It's trademark? Shit. Well, if I call it a brain spanker, do we all know what I'm talking about? We're just gonna go with that. This is a fucking brain spanker. Yeah, I know he's got some kind of actual in-game lore about him, but look at that guy, he's a brain spanker. Anyway, he doesn't have much for mechanics aside from occasionally uses big point-blank AoE and spawns ads, which isn't exactly engaging stuff, but they're the most intense mechanics new players will have seen at this point. But he has one more mechanic, and it's easily the best in the entire first wave of dungeons. 3 times in the fight, the boss will spawn an imp that will tether to him and render him invincible. To deal damage to him, you have to go and kill the imp. Now, that's not exactly an inspired, one-of-a-kind, super unique, mind-blowing mechanic, but it is a first for many new players. Specifically, it's the first mechanic on a boss that actually requires them to adjust to the fight. All of the early dungeons are riddled with mechanics that can be outright ignored so long as the party is able to output enough damage. This is an unfortunate rot that creeps deeper and deeper into the game as content becomes more dated and gear gets stronger, but at higher levels, this only becomes an issue when you have a really well-geared party. However, with early dungeons, the only time you actually have to do these mechanics is when you're running them with an entire team that's at the lowest gear level possible, and even then, some of the mechanics can easily be skipped. Tam-Tara holds the distinction for having the only mechanic that actually requires the players to think, albeit only slightly, to overcome it, no matter their gear level. All in all, Tam-Tara is still a pretty bad dungeon, but it does have the unique distinction of having one decent mechanic, which puts it miles above everything below it in this tier. Aesthetically, it's also pretty cool. I have an eternal hatred for generic underground dungeons, which are dungeons that are just a cave system with little to no interesting sights to them, and Tam-Tara is that about half of the time. The other half of the time, this dungeon is interestingly themed around the party making their way down a huge pit. It shows clear progress and keeps the endgame in sight the entire time. That's good work, and it deserves to be highlighted. However, 2 2 minor points of quality are far from enough to drag this dungeon out of F tier, but at least it's in the upper portion of this rank mire of content. Thanks for watching. Do you think Tam-Tara deserves to be at this place in F tier, or should it be higher or lower? Let me know in the comments. We've still got a ways to go as we plumb the depths of F tier, and I hope you'll stick around for the rest of the run. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and all that other random nonsense that people shout out at the end of YouTube videos to the point that it loses all meaning and just becomes part of the background noise, which ironically defeats the purpose of doing these calls to action, because a routine call to action is one that just fades into the background, so you have to think of new ways to call attention to it, and the best way you can think of doing that is with a self-referential run-on sentence that goes on for way too long and drags the end of the video out, and I should just stop. Sorry about that. I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good one, and always remember to forge ahead.